today. Quite a few questions. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks Jeff from Vintri for sharing your time here. We're working through Supply Chain Canada is looking at ways. I'm Tom McCaffrey, by the way. I guess I should introduce myself. Tom McCaffrey, President and CEO of the Alberta Institute of Supply Chain Canada. And we're investigating technology adoption because there's lots of change, there's lots of new technologies. Obviously, in the world that we live in now, there's now more than ever, I think companies are investigating technologies in different ways, and that brings in all kinds of new opportunities, but also new threats and risks to the process. So our intention with this series is to talk to some of the technology side, not for a sales pitch, but to kind of get some lessons learned, understand where they're coming from when it comes to technology, and find out what's new and what's different with some of these new technologies that we can adopt as supply chain professionals, but really, as the industry as a whole. So just a little sales pitch at the front. If you want to learn more about future events coming up, we do have an event on technology adoption. It's a paid event coming up for those that want to dive a little bit deeper into this. But this series is a free 1-hour series that will be running from now probably through the next few months with different options and different conversations happening around technology overall. So I'll stop rambling now, stop sharing my screen so that we can actually just have a conversation. So thanks for coming, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you just give us a little elevator pitch for your company just before we start, so everybody kind of has a feel for what your company does and what you have to offer? Can you do that? That's a big ask, but can you do that in a little elevator pitch for us?
Yes, as short and sweet as possible, right? So Vintri Technologies is essentially a data preparation company that is currently helping owner-operators, mostly in the midstream sector, with their supply chain components of all the different suppliers that handle the materials. So whether it's the mills, the coders, the logistics providers, everyone for an owner operator has a lot of dealing with those materials and all those records of those materials. And that data associated to that material is extremely valuable. So therefore, Vintri has built out a platform, processes, and procedures to help owner operators get better data, cleaner data, more usable data. And that's the final pitch is when you're done working with Vintri, then you have accurate, accessible, and traceable material data.
Right. And so I think what you're talking about kind of brings up an interesting thing. So when I put myself in my place, at my old place as a supply chain individual, I kind of look at the lay of the land today, and when it comes to technology, and you have technologies that kind of hone in and are specific, and then you have others that are more broad. Back in my day, the challenge was figuring out what the right ERP system was, and I think with the amount of different technologies that are available today, I think there's just a lot of different options on the table. And one of the concerns that when I looked at the research for this, there's Forbes and others that cite 25% of technology projects fail outright. So, as someone that would adopt technology, I have that concern. 25% on top of that don't return on investment. So now we've got, 50% of these projects, which are a challenge. However, they also cite that 54% fail due to poor management, while only 3% fail because of the technology itself. So kind of, some interesting thoughts there where you kind of come into this as you're a little bit concerned as a supply chain person with the amount of failure. But then when you recognize that the failure is not necessarily, it's a very small percentage because of the technology itself. I don't know that it provides a huge amount of comfort, but it should show that the need to manage these projects is really important. So from your perspective, do we have a technology problem, or is it actually a people problem that we have? Is it, what are the odds? What do those odds say to you as something to fear, or is technology the right solution here? Like, is it cart before horse when it comes to people and technology? What's your thinking around that?
Well, there's so many layers there.
Yeah.
But I mean, so first off, for us, innovation is three components, right? It's the technology, it's the people, and it's the process. So there's so many cases where someone just tries to throw technology at something and says, well, that should fix that. But they don't look at the processes and they don't look at what people they need to actually introduce that. There's to those stats. I fully agree that there's a lot of failure on pilots and proof of concepts. However, I like how you went down the, well, is it the management? Because I mean, we can dive into so many of these things, but there's just like in a pilot for a technology or a major project, there's scope creep. There is not able to actually collaboratively put everything on the table up front and know all the different factors. There's always an eagerness of the technology provider to say yes to whatever the owner operator is asking for. So whether or not they have any actual subject matter expertise on that. So there's so many different factors, right? But overall, the way to approach the technology is pain first. So the instances that we've been successful and we've seen our other counterparts of either startups or scale ups or emerging technologies, we all love our different names. All of us find success with owner operators on proof of concepts or on pilots or just initial projects when there is the opportunity to start at the problem and move from there.
So when we chatted before, you said something that was really interesting to me. Of course, I have a bias towards supply chain, but I mean, I'm really focused on this from the, as a general manager, also in my career, been on the front lines in a couple of ERP implementations and also a 3D printing, going from AutoCAD to 3D Inventor software. So those were some pretty major projects that I've seen. But I feel like things are fairly different today. But you kind of brought an interesting perspective on why the supply chain professional is important to play a role in this. And I just wonder if you could, sort of help us to understand where you see the role of supply chain and professionals and why they do play an important role in ensuring that the project itself is successful.
Yeah, so Vintri's been very fortunate to get involved with a lot of major owner operators from all sides of the North American market, and in many of those cases, it's because we were able to either find an influencer, champion, or decision maker within supply chain early on. The reason we see supply chain as such an important part is not just because our technology applies to the supply chain of materials, but more importantly because supply chain individuals are one of the few stakeholders in this engagement that have visibility into all the different silos within the organization. So depending on the technology can primarily focus on helping one specific group, like an integrity group or your CADMO of the engineering design group. But a lot of the technology is being looked at today. The greatest ROI you're going to receive is if you take a strategic look at how it can apply across the whole ecosystem of the organization. And for us, it's supply chain has that visibility.
So I've had a few conversations now with some different technology providers, whether they be blockchain, AI, companies like yourself. And I kind of see a little bit of a gap that starts to form in my head. And part of what I see is that the technology provider really needs the people that understand what it is they need to do. And that's fine. So, and I guess maybe I said that in a bit of a confusing way, but when I talk to someone in blockchain, for instance, they kind of give you this sales pitch like, yeah, we can do whatever you want it to do. And I go, well, that's great, but then I have to know exactly what I want it to do. So I need to know that I need your technology. So I then think about it, well, then I need to be a bit of an AI blockchain, nerd or really interested in those things because I've got to come prepared for that conversation. And yet I know the power that the technologies have when applied. And so, am I wrong in seeing that there's a gap to it? So I guess if I was going to, again, put myself in the place of someone that was adopting technology, and then I've got to figure out which one, well, that's kind of intimidating because some of these things are pretty complicated. Now, from talking with people like yourself, I do understand technologies better. Still don't understand Bitcoin, but I understand a lot of other things that sort of I could apply. But I feel nervous about having to be an expert and choose one. So is it the role of the person coming to you to really understand, or is it the role of the technology company to better explain, beyond saying we can do everything you want, which I think leads to the scope creep that happens as well. Where's that connecting point? How much do I need to know, and how much does the technology, or should the technology company, bring to the table in these scenarios?
I think fundamentally what you're talking about is the hammer and nail scenario. So there's a lot of technology providers out there that have created this cool hammer. I'll use blockchain as an example. When blockchain first came out, everyone just wanted to have a hackathon, a session, a 2-day planning where they were going to teach you as much as possible about all the benefits of DLT. And then they were going to ask you, okay, where would you apply this in your own organization? Because blockchain was this awesome, cool, new, shiny hammer that had worked really well in Bitcoin. And everyone was seeing all the features and the benefits of it. And they're like, where else can we apply this? And so a lot of companies just took the approach of, well, we want the customer to tell us where the nails are. We've got this hammer. We know how to build the hammer again and tweak it a little bit, but we need the customers to tell us where the nails are. And then there's, I think, the better approach, the technology providers that figure out, work with customers to identify their pains, their nails, and truly dig in and develop like cost of quality around that pain. Investigate where it impacts, where it starts to impact the ROI or the value within the organization, and how far out it actually spreads, and where the issue is the strongest and where it's the weakest, so that you can, as a technology provider, actually partner with those groups and say, okay, we have this, it hits this, this, and this. It doesn't hit these 3 other things that you're kind of looking for right now, but we know it can hit these top 7 right now, and we think you should give this a shot to calculate your return on investment on these 7 aspects instead of continuing to try to find something that hits all 10. So hammer and nail scenario there. And then to your point, I think it's always the responsibility of the technology provider to be able to break down their solution and their benefits in a way that's digestible to the market. Some of the greatest technologies and innovations to ever hit the market have failed because the individuals building it and creating it didn't figure out how to communicate it to the market and pass it along. It's just one of those scenarios. But if you can pass everything along and you can actually get everyone up to a certain level playing field of what you're talking about, then you can have direct comparisons, right? We're talking supply chain here. You want to be able to get to your scenario 3 bids and a buy. And in a technology scenario, you want to, if we're going to use our side, we're a centralized ledger versus a decentralized ledger, which is blockchain. You want to get to the scenario where you're looking at, hey, my need and my pain point is traceability, and I can go down this path, or this path. And then you have those organizations tell you why each path has its pros and cons. And of course, you trust the companies that actually point out the cons within their technology and their solution. Because the ones that say, no, my hammer's perfect, no, they just move on.
Right. So it's actually, that leads really well sort of to where my mind was going in terms of the next question. So I think that floats well. So it does seem to me, so again, I put my old guy hat on, put myself back in the day when bread was a nickel and everything else. But so when I look at that, I think back then it was, I'm looking at out of the box technologies. I'm trying to assess what works best for me in an ERP system per se. And yes, I have conversations with the companies, but they're offering me what they offer. It feels like today that's shifted, where I'm now looking at this as a relationship I need to build with a company. And I'm coming forward with my problems, and I was looking to ERP systems to solve my problems as well. But we're moving into a more customizable world, I guess, when it comes to technology, and maybe that's a bit more the mindset. And maybe I'm wrong about that, so please feel free to correct me. But so has the way we purchase new technology changed, and are we looking for partners / developers rather than companies offering prepackaged solutions?
Little bit of A, a little bit of B. So and some people might like this analogy, some people might not like it, but I look at it from a one shop does all scenario versus an ecosystem approach. So for all of us, we can relate to that in our cell phones. So the Android platform versus the iOS platform. So I think ERPs are a great example of, you found one major partner, one company, and you went all in with them. And then you were so intertwined with them that you tried to see, well, can they build this and can they build that? Oh, we need some forms over here. Can we have the ERP spit out that? And can we adapt it to also handle this? So there is huge consulting projects to try to make an ERP do everything. And for me, that's the iOS approach, right? One system that takes on all of the tasks, and you can only go back to that one provider for the majority of your needs. What we're seeing more so as a shift is, you find that main provider that you partner with. So great examples are like Chevron's and Suncor's announcements of partnering with Microsoft. And they'll partner with Microsoft and they'll say, okay, Microsoft's going to help us with X, Y, and Z. Well, they'll actually utilize Microsoft to then look at, hey, Microsoft, what sub technology providers do you have that can address all of our needs? And just like an Android phone, you look for the different apps that do the best that you need. You just make sure that the ecosystem can all play nice with each other, and that you're not going to have to disrupt yourself every time you go down a new path. Because the jack of all trades, the one solution that fits all, I think a lot of people are realizing that's borderline impossible, especially in oil and gas and in most supply chain. It's so complicated. However, if you can find your niche providers that can help you with your one main pain point, but they create their solution to be adaptable, flexible, and configurable to play nice with others, then you can bolt them all together and make sure that they address your needs, but each of them is a subject matter expert in their field.
So that's great. And I think, for bigger companies, obviously they have the ability to draw Microsoft's attention into helping them solve problems. But for smaller companies, would a company like yourself kind of play that role? So like, if I look at this being more of a relationship, and you have certain problems that you can solve, to me, I like to really trust my suppliers going in. So relationships are more key to me than cost. Cost is always a factor, but for me, it's not always the biggest one. But in all these scenarios, that starts to be the concern is, we've got this relationship we have to develop, which hopefully it's good, but I'm not a big enough company to go to Microsoft and have them help me with this. But, can I approach folks like yourself, and if I find the right actors, they'll help direct me towards technologies that I need on top of theirs, or again, should, as an SME, because I don't have the ability to harness a Microsoft, I need to come a bit more prepared and maybe look at using resources to help me do that outside of that relationship.
Well, yeah, the Microsofts and the big consulting firms are one version of that. But there's also a much more applicable version for what you're talking about, in that in the Calgary startup ecosystem, the Houston one, which are the two that I deal with the most. There's a lot of different groups that are eagerly awaiting an opportunity to have a supply chain individual reach out, and then they can take them through all of their different technology providers that they help represent. So
Okay.
you've got IBM's, I want to say, oh geez, I'm not going to remember IBM's platform right now, but for a while you had Nucleus that had many different great startups within it, BizWorks being one of them. Within Zone Startups, you've Vintri is a member there. We share and introduce companies to our other Zone Startup companies at all times. So we've got Virum, we've got Hi-Fi, all these different organizations. We can say, oh, you need help, you want to look at this, this is how it goes. But you actually have those individuals like the executives in residence at Zone, at another one that's up and coming platform. Alberta Innovates is there to help on all this stuff. You have these individuals, and it's their whole goal to actually make those connections for you and help the technology companies get the introductions, but also help the owner operators of any scale, any size, find what they're looking for. So there's a lot of connectors out there, and then for the most part, a lot of the startups that are at like the next tier, the scale up per se tier, most of us have figured out who we can collaborate with and we can introduce to each other, so that we're helping these owner operators of any size tackle each of their problems.
Okay. So that's great. So there's an ecosystem, and I happen to know, having worked in government for many years before coming here, that those ecosystems exist across the country, slightly different names, but all in the Innovates space in each, and you can connect with your local economic development agency in your city, and they'll easily connect you into the resources that you have. So that's, just as a word of advice to those listening in, if you're not in Calgary, those ecosystems exist everywhere across the country. So once we are in this system, or we find the right partner to help us, start to understand where what the hammers are, and we start to walk. Is figuring out the nails or the use case? Is that where we start? I'm not familiar with one because I've never built one myself. I don't know that that's the starting point. What's the starting point in our relationship in terms of figuring out what the nails are, or how to move past the nails? Where do we start?
Yeah, so in our exact examples, usually we'll have someone in supply chain give us kind of the lay of the land of what are the top priorities for the organization for the next couple of quarters. And then from that high level, we'll try to identify what our solution, or how our solution can fit into one of those subcategories. Work with them to see if we can get one of their colleagues or partners within a group, let's say integrity or projects or just materials procurement, to get a connection with them and say, hey, this is what we're tackling. This is the pain point. This is how other operators have used this in the past. Does this exist with you right now? And is there opportunity to tackle this from a proof of concept, a pilot, or just some more research to show you that this option is there and it's available? And from our understanding, it meets this higher level initiative.
Excellent. So with the sorry, I've lost my space now. I've had the typical factor of the wife coming into the room. So that's great. So one of my concerns when I back up again from this now then is, I trust you as a supplier. That's great. But this sneaky supply chain brain that I have thinks, I get really nervous thinking about engineering contracts and lawyer contracts, and because it's pay by the hour sort of thing, and there's a risk inherent in that, and that you wonder where that money is being invested in. And it's not to say that there isn't trust, but there also needs to be a sense that I can trust that work that's being performed once we identify these things is is developing in the right way at the right speed for the right cost. So is there a way to de-risk some of that? Am I wrong in thinking that this is a problem? Am I being too conspiracy minded with it within this relationship? Is it a fixed contract? How does that relationship work? And is there a way to slightly de-risk the process so I feel comfortable that I'm not, paying a lawyer's fee and you charge me in 6-minute increments every time I have an issue?
You're not wrong, because we all know there's way too many cases of huge overruns on every type of project. Whether it's a capital project, it's a proof of concept project, just projects in general have the reputation of overrun. So much so that time and material contracts almost don't exist in our world anymore. It's got to be set up as a lump sum or a fixed price per something that is controlled, so that there's limited risk there. So the commercial model can definitely adapt and be set up so that you eliminate those variables, such as just generic hours, and you put that risk back on that technology provider of like, hey, this is what we want to do. We're all going to agree to the scope. We're going to outline it the best of our ability, and we're going to pay this amount. And if you go down a rabbit hole and a tangent and 3 other things, doesn't matter. That doesn't get billed back to us. Because there's going to be cases, especially I've experienced, field deployment. You'll send someone out for, and this isn't our company, but a company we work with well. They sent a person out to train and onboard everyone on their tablets for a week, and the field was like, no, we just want this person to stay here. And they didn't think, no one had the conversation at that point that, hey, our whole bid and process for this proof of concept was to have that person there for a week, not for 4 months.
Right.
And at the time, the technology provider, they're just like, hey, this is great. I'm gonna keep this person out there. We're gonna have eyes on the whole thing. We're gonna make sure our technology gets adopted better than everything. The one note there about change management, I mean, of course you would want someone there at all times, but the cost of that person being on site for 4 months instead of 1 week threw the whole project out of whack and made the technology look expensive when it wasn't. It was that on-site representation that turned the whole project upside down. So coming back to the de-risk though, so the commercial model and how you approach it can be a great de-risker. The other de-risk is and sorry for all the cliche terms, but eat the elephant one bite at a time. You find your pain point, you have an issue. Of course, every organization right now has been being bombarded by digitally transform, digitize now. So everyone's like, we got to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Well, no, the ones that, like, we have some of our customers that'll jump on webinars with us, and we always ask them, what advice do you have for everyone out there? Take it one step at a time, take it one bite at a time, whatever phrase you want to use. So the de-risk is set it up in a small, controlled environment. Just tackle a few things. Yes, this solution might fix 100 things, but what are the 10 most important things that you want to see how it addresses those things? Let's just talk about those 10 things. And when everyone else wants to experiment and get their hands into the pilot, hold them back and say, you can be in the next pilot. First, we need to prove it on this scale in this setting. And then the final thing of the 3 is supply chain is a great partner to Vintri, because supply chain has given us letters of intent or just different documentation that has allowed us to go out to that ecosystem and get outside funding for proof of concept, for a pilot, or for development growth of our platform. So that's de-risking it to the nth degree, because in some of them, the operator didn't have to pay a dime for a huge upgrade to our platform or an expansion. It was the outside third-party organization that helped fund the whole thing.
Yeah, that's I think government does a lot of really amazing things. I don't know that they always promote what they do, as they do their best with what they can, but there's a lot of resources there. It can be difficult to navigate, and they also try to, they do different roadmaps and different things. They try to help people through that process, but it can be really, really challenging. So it's good to know that, because the technology companies, a lot of them have come up through these different incubators and these different things. They actually become quite adept at knowing the system and understanding it. So there's an advantage there. The other thing that I'll say from my industry days is that Alberta Innovates has, I believe, their TDA's technology. I can't remember what that stands for. And NRC IRAP, the federal government, has their ITAs, which are similar in that those individuals also really understand the ecosystems quite well and can help connect companies in as well. So there's more than one option of how to get connected in. And it's a pretty powerful tool. It can be a bit frustrating and slow at times, but government moves at the pace that it needs to. But for most companies, that de-risking can be the difference between going forward and not going forward in a lot of cases. So connecting into that can be really helpful in reducing costs, de-risking the project itself, and maybe making sure that you are connected to the broader community, both on the innovate side, but also on the technology side.
Right, and for the technology providers out there, I would definitely advise them. There are a lot of opportunities there, but many of them will entice you or directly request you to change your roadmap, and you really have to fundamentally don't chase the proof of concept or one of these funding opportunities if it means quickly inadvertently changing your roadmap.
Right.
We have been fortunate that over the years there's been some that just took a lot of bandwidth to chase, and we still got the money, and it still helped us grow because overall it advanced us, but it actually slowed us down in two other areas because we spent so much time making something fit a specific portfolio or a specific request. We learned from all of these situations, and a great example I can give you is there was a major fund. I think there was a $1.5 million up for grabs about a year and a half ago, where it wasn't NRC via IRAP, but it was a different group within the federal side, and they were seeking applications for blockchain to solve steel traceability for Canada. Well, for us, we had an almost direct solution, almost fully built out at that point, that did everything they wanted, but it wasn't technically blockchain. So we could have, to pursue that money, we could have said, okay, well, we'll add some DLT on the fringe, on the edge, one of the modules will make it blockchain to do this. And we just, luckily as a team, had learned from our mistakes previously about chasing the shiny penny. We said, no, we're just going to submit this as us, and we're going to submit it and say, no, we can solve the problem that you have identified, but we don't solve it through blockchain. So submitted it. Unfortunately, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, but someone on that other side had determined that nail had to be solved by blockchain and only blockchain. And instead of seeking partners to just solve the problem, they were seeking for a specific blockchain solution. Right. So luckily we spent maybe a couple weeks filling out some forms and building a proposal, but we didn't change our roadmap. Previously, we had chased some things and built a tangent on our roadmap that took away a lot of bandwidth from some of the great people on our team.
So if we just go back to, where do I get started? So if I'm, I got a pretty good understanding as a supply chain person or general manager, whatever my role is, what I want to do. And I kind of understand enough about the technologies to think that they might work for me. When I come forward, what are the basic questions I should ask someone, both from how do we figure out we're a right fit, and then just some basic questions that someone might ask, to sort of get the conversation started. Is there any advice that you have for someone like that that's close to wanting to start the conversation. Is that the right time? And then what advice do you have for them in terms of what are maybe some of the right questions they should be thinking about formulating?
I mean, some of the most common ones, I would say you'd formulate your questions and essentially create kind of what you're looking for, and then that's almost just like I have my elevator pitch. You'd create your pitch of I'm interested in technology or solution providers that are addressing this pain, this pain, this pain, and maybe pick like your top three that you're seeking or interested in. And that's where you could reach out to the zone startups, the Alberta Innovates, the Startup Calgaries, and say, hey, this is the pain point. I'm looking to start get introduced to different solutions out there. What organizations, local or afar, is there that you're aware of that I can start talking to? Then when you get that introduction to that startup or that scale up organization, or could be just a consulting company that knows a lot of different solutions, and they're software agnostic. Geez. You can, what I would say there is you ask them, how do they address the pain? What is it about their approach that makes their solution different and better than others? You want them, of course, to be talking about their solution, not trying to talk down other solutions. And then also you want use cases, you want examples of where they've applied it before, how other organizations have used it. If they're really early startup, yes, they're going to say, well, we don't have a pilot yet. We're looking for that one company to give us that first pilot, but they still should have use cases in other industries or other realms where something similar benefited them by utilizing this technology. There's a lot of opportunities where a new technology for oil and gas is actually just an adaptation of that technology from somewhere else, and they've modified it for our industry.
Right. Well, I've just thrown another little tiny sales pitch up to everyone here, just in terms of, we're so again, we're as an organization, we're trying to help you move forward. We're trying to bring these things to light, and of course, we have an hour today, so there's only so much we can go through. We do have an individual highly experienced. We can look at his background. He's worked for Ford Motor Company and some larger companies. And has a full day session around looking at the strategic adoption of disruptive technologies. You could probably ask some more questions, and actually we're going to have some time here and be open to questions if anyone has them. Perhaps you could write them into the chat there, and we'll be able to answer them. But this is available on our website too. I just thought I'd flash that up because I know, for some on the call, you're probably going to be looking at next steps. Obviously, Jeff is there with Vintri to support those with his technology. We're also looking more broadly at the types of technologies that you can solve specific supply chain problems with, and all of that. I think that knowledge development, listening to people like Jeff, understanding where you sort of start from, and actually that's where our conversation is going to go to in our next webinar, which is in September. I know there's actually quite a few people already signed up for it, but we're going to get more specific in terms of the use case and so forth. So we will be sort of providing some steps forward there for all of you as well, if you're interested in that. So, I think we'll see if any questions pop up here, Jeff. But, the ecosystem is one, I think that, that the government side of things is such a major advantage that many companies don't really explore. And, the idea that, you can start to solve problems using resources beyond just your own company resources. I think that's something in today's, day and age that, is going to become more and more important to a lot of companies. But so, what's COVID's obviously impacted everyone in different ways, but are there things that you've seen evolve quickly that maybe ways in which your technology will evolve, or maybe ways in which your company has had to evolve based on some of the impacts you're seeing, or for yourself in the technology space, has it still been sort of even keel and hopefully it is, but what's been your experience over the last 6 months for your company and for your technology?
Yeah, so last 6 months have been interesting to say the least. We've been very fortunate. We've been able to continue to grow during this time. So we had to experience onboarding new individuals, adding team members without ever even interacting with them in person. So that's been a whole new endeavor. We have been able to, for the most part, successfully transition our relationships with our customers into a fully virtual interaction. We're in the midst of really focusing on expanding into the US right now. So that has been a big impact for me, not to be able to travel and not having any sight into when that actually will recommence, maybe next year kind of thing. So really, from a technology provider, you brought it up before, relationships are built, and then you find that individual credible and you trust them. Therefore, you build that relationship so that they can come to you and say, okay, we can help you with this, and this, but we don't actually help you there. So we're not going to overpromise and underdeliver. And that's where so many individuals look for those relationships, because the credibility is not going to be on a new tech. The credibility is usually going to be on the individuals representing the new tech. So adapting that over the last 6 months of trying to build credibility over a Zoom call, over a Teams call, is much more difficult. For our solution, for our platform, visibility into data and access to usable data versus documentation, just going into PDFs and going into like document management, has had a huge uptick. A lot of organizations are now seeing that because they can't send someone out to a plant for manufacturing, or they can't have someone jump into the right of way to check all of the documentation, they want the data. They want actual usable data. So for that, we've been able to leverage that and see growth and more interest in all aspects of that, as well as a lot more efficient data capture tools. Because before, to get data from the field, you might have someone actually writing down on a clipboard, then hand that over to another person that's typing it up into an Excel spreadsheet, then emailing that back to Calgary. Versus now, we've got to do everything smarter, leaner. Let's get the individuals to capture that data in near real time as quickly as possible, and not have 3 different individuals transcribe that before it gets back to the home office. So data capture is definitely growing at a very high pace. And then finally, data visualization is, I think, one of the most interesting aspects. You brought it up earlier, 2D to 3D, now 3D to augmented reality, to just being able to take a 3D visualization of a compressor station or a pipeline and layer in all the different sources of data, right? So not just the documentation, not just the material data, but also the welding information and all the different layers of data. So instead of a binder turnover package, think more, you can get a virtual model that has all the layers and all the tags associated to it, that has every little bit you need in a turnover package.
Yeah, so that kind of brings up another question for me, just in terms of, so I came into this conversation really thinking about, what are those initial stages? What does the relationship look like between myself and the technology provider? What early questions to ask? But then another thing comes to mind, just in terms of management of the project, and maybe from a best practice standpoint, you have some input. So now I found a partner. We've got those initial questions, but I should likely also be planning for, what the change is going to mean. So uh, does a company have to have I think a champion is one way to deal with it, but there could also be a change management expert. There needs to be some, obviously there's training, and especially if you get into things like, the technology on the outside looking in looks very complicated, or it just seems that way when computers start thinking for themselves, and all of this stuff that's going on now in the background. It can be kind of difficult to understand, what people are going to have to learn, what they're going to have to do differently, if anything. So what else do I need to plan for outside of, getting the partner, finding the technology? What other management stuff do I need to have access to make sure that the project moves forward successfully?
I think there's a lot of discovery questions that need to come around implementation. So you bring up the great point of there's certain solutions out there that are a low price of $49.99 per seat. Whoa, that's amazing. But then you hear the horror stories of the $16 million implementation costs. So there's two very distinct sides to the cost of change, right? There's the actual tools and platforms that you can look at that will bring value to your organization, and then there's, to your point, the change. That's where I love. I mean, you've got a session coming up here, which is exciting. I've also taken in other ones where, from an operational excellence standpoint, you've got the head of digital innovation at an owner operator explaining that they just do little $5,000. I think his phrase was silver bullets, and it's just a $5,000 silver bullet. He does it. He controls whatever the scope. He gets whatever scope he can from that technology provider for $5,000, and then calculates while they do that project what was the change, what was the implementation required, all of this, and it gives him some internal base numbers to leverage and calculate what it would look like on a full scale effort. So the fact is that we're fortunate enough, Vintri's been around long enough, we have the executives that come to us and say, we don't need to see your marketing. Your shiny beads are not needed. We need to see your use cases. We need to see, we need to phone up the other owner operators and talk to them about how difficult this was to implement. We're over that hump of not just trying to find someone to take a chance on us, but many organizations out there need that little $5,000 pilot to show, okay, calculate this, and then there's scales of economy, of course, that there'll be savings, but you need that little proof case.
Excellent. Well, I think we've actually managed to get through all the questions that I have. So I guess where I'll leave it with you, is there anything we didn't get to today that you wanted to get to? Is there any information that you'd like to share with the group that's here beyond what we've discussed?
I would just go back to I know you're all being bombarded by transform, digitize now. It's definitely a strategic component. So we mentioned Alberta Innovates. We talked about IRAP. One that we didn't mention was Techterra has some great funding that Vintri's leveraged in the past. A lot of the different government, non-government opportunities, they come up very fast if you're not looking for them ahead of time. And there's been many times where we have had to work with a partner to try to get a letter of interest signed, sealed, and delivered within like 2 weeks. And in some organizations, that's just impossible. So definitely plan ahead, look as far out as you can, and start the conversations early, especially right now with so many different organizations out there. There's sometimes where you talk to an organization and maybe they're not hitting all the boxes you're looking for right now, but if they're approaching it the right way that you think that the market needs, keep in touch with them, because I know I'm talking to individuals we talked to 3-4 years ago, and we're a completely different company than we were 3-4 years ago. That's the best feature for the most part of new technology is we evolve extremely quickly, and even though we didn't hit something previously, look back at that company, they might now address that because we learn from every single pilot, from every proof of concept we work on. So a long outlook, and planning ahead on a lot of this funding stuff, because to your point, there's a lot of opportunities from the government, but for some mean reason, the funding opportunities usually only pop up with like a 1 minute or 1 month window. And then it's just go, go, go. You got to fill this out. You got to get everyone on board. So planning almost a full year out is much more feasible.
Yeah, my experience is, and especially when you have governments that change over and their perspective on the world is slightly different and the words are slightly different. The intent of the program might be similar, but change internally in government needs to happen sometimes for different reasons, and therefore the funding that they have does pop up, often has a tight window. So if you want to get into that space, my advice, when I was in government to the companies was to be active with the individuals, make connections with your economic developers and RCI RAP, Alberta Innovates, and stay connected with them, because they may not have something for you today. It can be complex, so you have to take the time, you have to get good at it, you have to be willing to invest your time into the process, and you'll get better at it. Yes, that can be a bit of a barrier at first, but you'll get smoother. And the other thing that I've also seen is that as you develop those relationships, like you say, 2 or 3 years later, they start, or even shorter timelines, start coming back to you once they understand more about your company and your needs. And so it's a two-way street, and it's an opportunity, and it's just networking. And staying communicating with those individuals, from my experience, can net valuable rewards over the longer term. So that's great. So our next conversation, we're going to get more specific, and we'll dive in a little bit into the use case attributes and how to avoid scope creep. We'll get more specific on some of these topics, and then the role of industry in making technology better. So just maybe diving into a couple of examples of a case that, took the technology from one place to another, and that experience of the company and also of the technology provider. So I want to thank everybody for coming out today, and hopefully you'll join us for future sessions and consider investing more time into this, because it is a challenging thing to overcome. We do have a few minutes, so I don't see any questions, and we asked that a while ago, so I'm assuming there aren't any. But thank you for your time today, and thanks, Jeff, for coming out and giving us the benefit of your experience.
Thank you very much for the conversation, Tom. It's a pleasure, and excited to dig in into more detail with a few examples that we've been through over the last couple of years.
Excellent. And I apologize, I don't have Jeff's contact info here up on my screen to share. I meant to flash that up there for everyone to see. Maybe, Jeff, you can pop your info into the chat box there if anyone wants to connect with you. I apologize for that. I seem to have had only 2 cards open here for some reason, and I don't know where the third one is. And for those of you who have to pop off, if you need to connect with Jeff or myself, please feel free. We're on the internet. You can find us, Vintri and Supply Chain Canada, Alberta Institute. We're both out there, and look forward to the next conversation.
Perfect. Yes, definitely reach out on LinkedIn, and I've put my email up there. So excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.